Hello friends, welcome to Conley Cake Studio. I am Jen Conley, owner and sole operator of Conley Cake Studio. Today I'm going to show you how to make vegan pumpkin spice scones. I will walk you through each step, including a gluten-free option for our celiac friends. Mise en place is a French term for having everything in its place. This is referring to the setup that you have before you start cooking. So reading through that recipe, making sure that you have not only those ingredients, but the tools and equipment necessary. Another key factor is you want to make sure that your ingredients are at the right temperature, so that way you will have consistent results. Okay, for this recipe, you will need all-purpose flour, baking powder, pumpkin spice, salt, granulated sugar, plant-based butter, pumpkin puree, vanilla extract, powdered sugar, and oat milk. For the flour, you can either use all-purpose flour or a gluten-free flour. I have all-purpose flour here, but my favorite gluten-free flour is King Arthur Measure for Measure, and you just do an equal amount of flour and then it's a gluten-free recipe. And I'll link that below in the description. For baking powder, I typically use Clabber Girl just because it's what I've always used. However, today I've got a little Great Value baking powder. It's fine. For the pumpkin spice, the store-bought pumpkin spice I find really overpowering and unbalanced. So a long time ago, I actually bought pumpkin spice, used it, and then this is a custom blend of spices that I have in here. So I have cinnamon, nutmeg, ginger, and cloves, and we're gonna make that together so that way if you want a custom blend, you can have one. For the pumpkin, I highly recommend using real pumpkin. I always use Libby's. It is just a really great brand. It delivers consistent results, and just whatever you do, do not use the pumpkin pie mix. For butter, I use this Country Crock avocado oil. It tastes exactly like butter, and it has really great consistent results. I use a General Sea Salt instead of table salts. And then for granulated sugar, I prefer Maker's Mark because it is vegan. It's made without bone char. A lot of sugars have bone char in them, so you just really have to do a little bit of research and find out which ones have that vegan alternative if that's something that you want. One of the things that I use that really elevates my products is my house-made vanilla. So it's super dark because I steeped it for like a year. Well, not quite a year, 50 weeks, but you know, hey. So this is super delicious. So now we are going to get started. So the first thing you really want to do to make sure that you have really good scone dough is to make sure that your ingredients are chilled. So what we're going to do is we're going to open up this pumpkin puree and we're going to cut up this butter and get it nice and chilled. So you want to, when you bake, you want to weigh everything out because it is much easier to weigh everything out. And it also gives you more consistent results. So if I use like a tablespoon of something, like that tablespoon can, it can be different each time you use it. So we know there's 15 grams or milliliters in a, let's say we need a teaspoon or a tablespoon of vanilla. It's supposed to be 15 grams. Well, what if it's 17 grams one time and 13 grams another time? That's going to give you inconsistent, unreliable results. Alright, so to properly weigh something out, I'm actually going to move you guys so you can see this a little bit better. So turn this. Bear with me, guys. Sorry. Oh, wrong way. All right. So, sorry, you guys. All right. So, see my scale. We're going to turn it on. Oh, I probably should have zeroed it out first, but you know. All right. So, zero it out. And then for this specific recipe, we need 313 grams of pumpkin. So we're going to scoop this in here until we get the right amount, and then we're going to put it in the freezer to get it nice and chilled. Freezer's going to chill it a lot faster than the fridge, which is what we want. All right, so now we're at 313. All right, so and that's exactly how you weigh everything out. So next we want to get this butter chilled. So we're going to go ahead and cut up 141 grams of butter. And so when you do the butter for the scones, you want to cube it because you want smaller pieces. So when we go to cut in the butter, we want the pieces no bigger than peas. So it makes sense to start with cubed butter, right? So I just cut it into fourths vertically, and then I dice that up. And then I have these cubes of butter. And you can see that it's not exactly, it's not soft, but it's not like super hard either. So we definitely want to get this in the freezer chilling. Because as you work with the scone dough, it will get warm by your hands, by you handling it, messing with it. So we want, if we get our ingredients as cold as possible, then hopefully the scones will stay in the same shape. Because if you don't make sure that everything's nice and chilled, then the scones can kind of like fall flat and just give you really inconsistent results. Not, you know, really not that pretty. Perfect. All right, so now we are going to step away for a second and go put this in the freezer, and I will be right back. All right, so now we are gonna make our custom spice blend. So I'm gonna start with some cinnamon. I'm gonna throw some cinnamon in here. Probably a lot. So we got a ton of cinnamon because that's the bulk of our spice. Then we're going to add in some ginger. Okay, that's taking too long. Okay, and now we want to grind up just a little bit of cloves so we can get a little clove in there. So I'm putting some cloves into the coffee grinder, and we're going to grind that up because fresh is always better. ground these are. That works. I like that. So, okay, and next we're going to take some fresh nutmeg and we're going to grate that in there. But, of course, I forgot to grab the grater, so let me go grab that real quick. Alright, and we are just going to grate this right on top. So I love using fresh nutmeg. It tastes just incredible. So you just take a little nutmeg and we're going to grind it right into there, okay? All right, we're going to go a little bit more. So off camera, I'm just grating it into a separate bowl to make sure that I get enough nutmeg in there. And we'll dump that in there. But we still need more. I'm going to show you guys what I'm doing. Just grating it into a separate bowl. Okay. All right, now we're going to take this, kind of stir it together. You want to break up any big lumps that are in there. I think I'm going to add a little more I think we need a little bit more nutmeg in here, and then we'll be good to go. So gonna mix all that yummy nutmeg in. All right, and now we have a custom pumpkin pie spice that is gonna taste incredible in these pumpkin spiced scones. Okay, so now that we've got our nutmeg in there, we can start to measure out the rest of our ingredients. So, first things first, we're going to start with flour. Oh, no. Sorry, you guys. All right. So, we are going to weigh out our flour. So, if you want to do gluten-free, you can just use equal amounts of gluten-free flour. But I am not making these gluten-free today because I don't have gluten-free flour in the house. So we're just going to use all-purpose flour. And we need 388 grams of all-purpose flour. Almost there. All right. Next up is we are going to add some granulated sugar. Right, and for granulated sugar, you are going to need about 113 grams. So we're having problems zeroing out. Always zero out your scale before you add. So, I've got 113. So you don't need a ton of sugar, just like just enough to kind of sweeten up the scones. There we are. And then next we are going to measure out our other dry ingredients. So for baking powder, you are going to need 12.5 grams. See if I can do it without a spoon. Nope. All right, hold on, you guys. I got to grab a spoon. Perfect. All right. So we've got our baking powder. We're going to need some salt. We got salt, we need some pumpkin spice. Okay. And then we're going to need a little bit of our vanilla. So you're going to need 7.5 grams of vanilla. Okay. Go a little over, it's not the end of the world. All right, so here's what we're going to do. We are going to add all these dry ingredients together. So we got salt, sugar, flour, some pumpkin pie spice, some baking powder. And then you're going to whisk these all together with a whisk. And then you just whisk it together until it's all evenly mixed. So I think that's pretty good right there. All right, next, you're gonna use what is called a pastry blender. So this tool right here is a pastry blender, right? So like these little things right here, they work kind of like knives. And what it's gonna do is it's gonna cut your butter into your dry mixture. And we're going to go in and make little half circle turns. And we're gonna turn the bowl as we do it. So this way, it will break the sugar down, cut it into the flour, and kind of mix it all together. All right, so we have our frozen butter pieces. So I actually froze these before I ever even started on this tutorial, so they're really nice and firm. So now, this is how you cut your butter in, like that. Go down and turn, down and turn. And then I turn the bowl, so this way I can get all of it. And then you just keep going, keep going. So you see how the butter's starting to kind of mix with the flour a little bit? And then those big cubes are starting to get smaller. Well, we're going to keep going until those cube pieces are smaller than peas. You want all your butter pieces to be no bigger than the size of a pea. And this is because it will, again, give you more consistent results. You don't want big pieces of butter in your scone. You want the smaller pieces in there. It'll make sure that the fat is more evenly distributed. So we're actually almost there. So sometimes it gets stuck on there. You just gotta convince it to kind of go through. And we're almost there. So our next step after we fully cut this butter in is we're going to add our cold ingredients, and then we're going to use a fork to mix the dough together until it becomes cohesive. But you don't want to overmix it, because then you're not going to have those light, fluffier scones. My scones aren't like traditional scones. They are not dry and crumbly. They're almost more like a biscuit texture. They are so good. People who don't like scones love these scones. Unless maybe you don't like pumpkin spice, then you definitely won't like these. All right. Okay, now it is time to add our chilled ingredients to our dry ingredients, or wet ingredients. So we add the vanilla in. And then we're going to add in our pumpkin. So normally when I make scones, I use oat milk. However, in order to get the right amount of pumpkin in here, I decided not to put any milk in here, and I am going with pumpkin puree instead. So I'm going to stir this all up. Just like so. So you basically just want to get all the dry ingredients wet with the liquid in there. And we are just about there. I'm gonna get a pair of gloves on because I really hate touching dough with my hands. And then we're gonna form. All right, so what we're gonna do is we're going to take a piece of parchment, and that's what we're gonna form our scones on. So we have a piece of parchment paper. We're gonna take a little bit of flour and sprinkle that on there. Just so it doesn't stick. Now, I'm gonna take this part, kind of mix it together with our hands a little bit. Make sure we get all those dry ingredients in there. See, this is why I like to use gloves, because I don't like touching this stuff, but that's okay. All right. I'm just trying to get all this stuff mixed in. Still a little bit of dry stuff in there. Okay. Most of that stuff in there. All right, so you can get it into like a little ball. Kind of flatten it down. You want it to be like a 6 to 8 inch circle that's at least 1 inch high. So I'd say this is probably roughly about 6 inches. Maybe now it's like more like 7. All right, and we're gonna go get a sharp knife to cut this into pieces. All right, so we're gonna cut it in half. Separate them from each other. And then I cut this into eighths. So we cut each little half in half and then half again. And you make these adorable little scone-shaped wedges, right? All right, there's that. And then we're gonna put this on a piece of, there we go. All right, so I'm gonna rearrange this so that way they'll all fit on here and bake up nicely. So, just like so, okay? All right. We'll rip off the excess parchment just so it doesn't hang out in the oven and burn. Oh. All right, and then we are gonna take this and put it in the freezer while we preheat the oven. So that way our dough doesn't get warm, stays nice and chilled, and then that way the scones will also keep their shape. Okay, so I just put the scones in the oven. We're gonna bake them at 375 for about, I set my kitchen timer for 28 minutes because that's how long it takes for my specific oven. But I would go anywhere from 25 to 30 minutes. You'll know they're done when they have a nice golden brown hue to them. And while that is baking, we are going to make our glaze. So this is a pumpkin spice glaze. So it's made out of powdered sugar, pumpkin spice, and milk. So we are going to start with some powdered sugar. We need 230 grams of powdered sugar. There we go. Next, we are going to add some pumpkin spice in. Right. Gonna whisk this all up, preferably without making a mess. All right, so now we are gonna add in some milk. I already told you guys how I love using Oatly. It's really good consistency. Alright, so we're going to start there. I didn't add the full amount. I want to make sure that we got a good glaze. You don't want it to be too runny. Just stir it until it's nice and smooth. So I used about 70 grams of milk. It's not a hard number. You just want to add enough to get a good consistency. Like, I probably added a little too much, but it'll be okay. As it sits here, it'll kind of thicken up as well. Looks nice. And then we'll put this into a piping bag and pipe it and drizzle it over the scones once they've cooled off. All right, so I have pulled the scones out of the oven. I then put them on this cooling rack to cool. They're right about there. Then we whipped up this pumpkin spice glaze that is now very thick because I added more powdered sugar to it. So if your glaze is too thin, add more powdered sugar. If it's too thick, add a little more milk until you get the right consistency. You don't want it to be too runny. You do want it to stay on the scones. There you go. Oh, that's nice, isn't it? All right. So I'm going to move you closer while we put this into our piping bag and get going. All right, for our glaze, we are going to put our glaze into a piping bag. So, You just want to cut off the tip like so. All right, and then we're going to drizzle this on. Like a nice thick drizzle. Just like so. And then we'll put the rest of the drizzle back into the container, and there you have it. You have delicious pumpkin spice scones.